Hello and welcome everybody to the Great Chat, the live group chat for the beginning of 2026. If you are familiar with our last meeting, we last met up, the five of us, plus Colin, who's not able to make it today, but we got together and we chatted at the end of last August. And we had so much fun that we wanted to get back together again and update each other and talk with each other again, because this is such a good group of people. All right, so let's go around and introduce ourselves briefly for maybe like 30 seconds. And I was also thinking, if you have some like good news of something that you accomplished last year, even in your personal life that you would like to share, I think that would be fun to include in your 30 seconds if you'd like. All right, I have Srinidhi next on the screen.
Okay, I will go first. As a reintroduction to anyone who probably is not familiar with me, I am Srinidhi. I am a co-founder of an AI startup, and we are building tools in legal tech and legal tech adjacent spaces like compliance right now. And there's been a lot of developments that have been very exciting through the year, more so around the holidays, actually. Holidays were pretty busy, so I'm excited to get into all of that. And something big that I accomplished, I would like to give a personal example. I finished traveling 30 countries in my lifetime. I never planned it. It just like so happened. I was traveling so much last year that I hit the 30 country mark, and I'm very proud of that.
Excellent. Kevin?
Hi, Kevin Keller. I am General Counsel at Forward Networks, and I've got a side startup called Takuchi, where I'm the CEO. We've been developing all kinds of things from not just legal tech, but a lot of just general tech. I think my milestone is I walked into 2025 having made my first app ever that I got through the iOS store on Christmas Eve of 2024. And by Christmas Eve 2025, I was fine-tuning models and building some very sophisticated stuff that's pretty interesting and doing actual kind of scientific research on the projects, which has been just kind of as an inner engineer has been really fulfilling.
Nice. Emma?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Justin. My name's Emma Kelly. I am the founder of QuadK, a go-to-market consultancy for legal tech and GRC startups. And then I'm also a co-founder of an LLM evaluations company that we should be having our proof of concept end of January, beginning of February. So I'm really excited about that. In terms of personal milestones, really excited. I started QuadK last year, and I've just been really, really happy with the level of growth so far. So putting out my own shingle has been really fun. Thank you.
Nice. Nate?
Hi, Nate Kostelnik. I'm in Pittsburgh, lawyer, legal engineer, kind of in the legal tech space. For 2025, I wrote a book. Wasn't a big project, but it was something I was glad to get done. A thrilling book about LLC formation, but it was nice. It was a fun project to work on and learn all those skills. And planning to do another one in 2026.
Nice. And I guess to round it out, my name is Justin Turman, and I am the host of this podcast. I own a consulting company, Automate Office Work. I used to be a legal counsel in a Fortune 500, and I just started automating everything using simple tools. And so I kind of I go toward that instead of going straight to AI. And my biggest milestone, I guess, would just be the quality of friends that I made over 2025. Like the group here is just a testament to it. Such a diverse group of great professionals. And I was even able in 2025, I contributed a chapter to a legal tech and AI book that was published by a publishing company. There were like 25 authors and I got to be one of them. And so great feeling.
Well, thank you, Justin. It's great to meet you too. I mean, the best part is the people we meet along the way. So thank you for bringing us together.
Yeah. It's such a great time to be alive.
I think I met Srini through you And then
Yeah.
we've since collaborated on a couple, articles that got published and have consulted, and worked together on some ideas and stuff. So this is great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be a part of this. All right. Since we last met, were you able to accomplish your goals that you had set for the end of 2025? Let's do a little bit of a look back.
I'll be honest, I don't remember my goals I set for the end of 2025.
Okay.
But I am pretty happy with how 2025 ended and how 2026 is beginning. So I think I met them.
That's excellent. And I guess on the flip side, do you have any goals for 2026, or is that also a no?
I don't think I have goals per se. I usually do intentions. So, I mean, I have specific goals for my business, both on my consultancy and on the startup side. But I think I just have intentions making more awesome connections like this, getting to learn more about AI and legal technology, and just getting to help more people.
Yeah. Okay. If nobody has goals, like, what are we working on? What are the upcoming projects, like the dreams that you guys have, and the cool stuff that you see coming up? Like there's so much new technology that's coming out like every other week. Are you excited about it, or is it kind of like it's getting to be too much? Like we need to slow down so we can use what we already have, kind of thing. Like,
I mean,
what's everybody saying?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, okay. I was
go
going
ahead,
to say, I was very intrigued by all the vibe coding posts that I saw over December, and it'll be interesting to see like how much steam it can sustain through the year. It's great, like people are coming together to build specific tools for their use cases, but building software is one thing, and then implementing it and maintaining it on a large scale, which is actually the boring work, is a different ball game altogether. So I'm like excited to see how that whole thing plays out.
Yeah. I kicked off, I tell people I've always tried to stay ahead of tech because I've been a product counsel, full stack, I call it, everything, tech transactions, you name it. And to do that, you have to stay ahead and kind of like see around corners. And that I've always had this mechanism of reviewing tech blogs and all this other stuff every morning. I've got a 10-minute, that I go through, I scan. Some of it's tech related. Some of it's like, what are the legal issues here? Could be the legal issues. How do they relate to what I'm doing, or could they relate? And that's been a really useful mechanism for me staying well ahead of the curve. And, I've worked at companies that were kind of pushing boundaries. And so I was working at Adept in early starting 2024. And they were the first company to do agents, like web browsing used it. We patented it, and then they got all the R&D team got poached by Amazon. And now the next year, and I was all pitched to sell the stuff. So I developed agreements and really thought through all the things that now people started talking about in the second half of 2025. But it only took like 6 months for the rest of everything to catch up to what was, in the past might have been 3 years ahead. And so it's just accelerating so fast. I've had to like add additional mechanisms to keep up, including watching a lot of the people vibe coding and doing experiments, because I can't possibly test everything myself. And if I did try, it'd just suck up all my time. So I try to watch a lot of that and see where things are going. I did my first not vibe code, but like explanation walkthrough for people and how to start from scratch. I made a legal citation checker at Legal Week in like March or April, open sourced or released it. Silence. Nobody was interested in vibe coding at that point, and it really wasn't vibe coding. I was using Cursor, and it was quite involved, and it was a lot harder to go find all the API documents and do it. Claude wasn't doing as much heavy lifting as it does now. And so for me, 2026 is like, how can I keep up? How can I keep ahead? I've sort of realized a lot of the stuff I've always kind of had in my head that I want to develop, and it'll be, this year will be a little bit about, filing some patents on a lot of that stuff that now I'm starting to see people in research starting to talk about the stuff that I researched and built, 6 months ago and filed provisionals on. So that's some of my 2026 goals, is to get my arms around that, stay ahead, keep innovating, I'm doing a lot of model evaluation too, like Emma. Mine is more, doing fine tunings and trying to figure out the inner workings of them and compare them against each other in different ways, how they reason, which ones reason best, all that kind of stuff. So I'm diving a lot more into science in 2026 and trying to really get my head around it as a engineer / scientist this year. I'd like to pivot from attorney to more of that.
You mentioned you have like a 10-minute thing that you review every morning for but technical and legal. Do you want to drop any suggestions or useful links or whatnot?
Yeah, no, I actually did a series for like a week or so and realized it's a lot, because the stuff that files through your head really quick, it's kind of in tacit knowledge, or at least like you're able to see it and make a quick decision. To write it down, like what you saw, what you thought about, how it was useful and everything, was a lot of effort. But I did it for like a week, and I have a series of tech blogs I follow, the standards, Wired, Engadget, Gizmodo, The Verge, TechCrunch, and a few others. I read the Post and a few other major newspapers and things like that as well. I try to scan through in like 10 or 15 minutes, pick a bunch of articles, and then through the day I'll usually read one. I'll take some notes, mental notes sometimes, but sometimes actual notes, and that's the process that I go through. But it varies day to day which publications and all of that, and it could be everything from what they're doing in robots and embodiment of AI to the new privacy laws and that you've got in California. I went through the whole process of opting out of the data collection stuff that got introduced in California at the beginning of the year. It was quite a process, but that's the kind of stuff I try to keep a finger on and catch both a mix of legal, engineering, tech, cultural, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
if you want, I can send you a link.
Oh. Yeah, I think that'd be great, because I kind of do something similar every morning. Is I have a pretty rich media diet, wanting to keep up on the latest trends and technology, looking at it kind of from a different lens, both just my own personal interest and then from a go-to-market perspective, see what kind of products are coming out there, how they're being marketed and things like that. But I look at a lot of the similar publications as well. And then, a lot of the cool papers that are coming out right now and things like that, I'll bookmark them and try to read them on the weekend.
I do that as well. Like any of the new research papers, that one catches my eye. Last week, it was the RLM one that was circulating quite a bit about recursive learning models. And, I took part of that. I'm not actually, was talking to Daza Greenwood, who does a lot of research in agents and a lot of stuff, and he's very active as well. And he had immediately like gone to Claude Code, built out an app that showed how it worked and showed its weaknesses and positives and all this. And so I went and did the same at night, but I did it for a different reason, to kind of understand how reasoning traces worked and how I could use those in my system. So yeah, I do a lot of like the same thing as Emma. Like if I see an interesting research paper, I try to bookmark it and get some time to read it later in the week or on the weekends. It's sort of a habit I got when I was at Adept, because I was surrounded by these incredibly intelligent, like PhDs in, in machine learning, AI, and they were just so excited about it too. And it kind of, got me excited. There'd be this in Slack channel. Did you see this paper? Did you see this paper? I'm bookmarking this one. And I was like, maybe I should be reading that paper. Why has it got them so excited? And it got me more, looking at those research papers and stuff in ways that I kind of maybe ignored in the past. And, and I didn't have my finger on the pulse in the same way. So the Emma's that's a great way to kind of try to at least see where the tea leaves are going a few months out.
The way that I approach it is that I figure technology is only going to increasingly change in the future. What I tell my clients now is that we have to focus on the process. Like, what are the actual steps that you're doing? Because I find most organizations, it's not written down. It's just in people's heads what they do, and everybody's doing something different. So if we can like map it out, like the actual, what are we doing here? Like even just mentioning like, hey, there should be a citation checking step. Okay, how do you check a citation? Well, we have these databases, and at first it might be a manual thing, and then you might get an LLM to do it. And then in the future, then you'd get an agent to do it. But you see the technology doesn't really matter because the process is the same every time. You can use different technologies as we go along. So I try not to be overwhelmed with the new technologies.
It's easy to get overwhelmed. It's a lot. And it's a lot for someone who's even tried to keep up and has prided myself on being ahead of the curve. It's a lot. It's way fast. If, as you mentioned, just kind of briefly, if it all stopped right now, and I think, lots of the AI researchers have said this, if we just stop developing right now, there's probably 10 years worth of implementation that we could do and things we could figure out how to do with this stuff right now, if everything just stopped today. But it's still running forward at a very fast pace.
Yeah.
I mean, the question
Yeah.
is also, does it matter so much as to like what is going on out there, or what kind of developments are happening every day, if you can't really implement it in appropriate business use case that is valuable enough for people? Like that's also another question. Like, and I say this because when I was 21, 22, I was working on nanomaterials research. I had like a very different life then, and that experience actually pushed me to consider a career in finance, because I felt like whatever I was doing then, like,
I think we might have lost her.
Oh no. Srinity's in India.
The same thing happens in Silicon Valley with my internet sometimes too. So yeah.
Okay.
And you're back, Srinity.
oh yeah. So I was going to say, so I have a different take on, the developments. Like, I'm not so worried about not keeping abreast with everything. Now I'm hyper focused on like knowing enough on both sides, on like the business side and like what is available technology wise to make a marriage between them. Because I know like no matter how hard I try, I can never, know everything that's out there in the world.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I as I'm developing, it's very hard when you see that shiny new thing not to then how would I build this in? And you've got to, if you're building a product, just say, here's the design, here's what I'm building. I cannot get distracted and start to add fancy new features that are great for my engineering brain loves it, that it's like innovative and all this, but I need to implement the thing that works now, and then then iterate from there, gradually, adding what makes sense. But it is really hard not to chase this shiny thing and say, how do I add this feature or functionality, or what could I build here? The vibe coding doesn't help because, you can have an idea and, it's gotten so good, Claude, that, I did a one-shot prompt patent comparison thing yesterday for a friend, like in an hour and, in the evening. And so you can get distracted by those side projects of just seeing, can I do this? And I have to constrain myself to some degree from not doing that all the time. And I've had to drop. That was one of the things I learned in 2025. I'd taken on a lot of projects, was helping a lot of people. And I just had to pull back and say, what do I really want to build? I only have a limited set of time. And if I build things and help other people too much, that pulls, I only have a limited set of time, and it's got to come from either my projects that I really, really want to do, or it's got to come from friends and family time, which I really highly value. And so that Srinity's to keep yourself on track and to manage your time and not get distracted, you kind of have to find a mechanism that you kind of can keep a little bit of a finger on the pulse and understand where things are going, but at the same time not lose focus on what you're working on.
Yeah, I would say from like a company perspective too. So a lot of the companies I consult with, a lot of it, even though I'm doing it from a go-to-market perspective, I oftentimes have to tell people you have to focus in on solving one high-value problem at a time. And that's your minimal viable product. Because since we can do so many cool things now with AI, and there's so many cool use applications, talking to founders, it's, oh, my product can do this, 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 and this. And, I have to work with them to really come down to the essence of what is the problem they're solving and why is it of value and who's it of value to. So you see that even on the company level, and you see that in a lot of legal tech companies. And when they don't get that right, that's really where they falter on the go-to-market and the distribution side of things.
Yeah, I've told people that's my weak point. I know that I chase the shiny things. If in truth, like if I found a great GTM CEO, I would move over to a CPO position, with my side startup, and because I think that's what's necessary is somebody who's got that GTM focus. And I'm a little too more research minded, and I go deep. I mean, I'm doing real research now, but yeah, you have to know that about yourself. I'm the person Emma is talking to and saying, stay focused, man.
It's so hard to do, and I am just as guilty of it. So I have to put on like strict processes for myself to not do shiny object syndrome as well. But it's such a temptation, especially now. I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easier to develop all of these cool products. And there's so much we can get deep into and look into, but then if you want somebody to buy it, or if you want somebody to use it, you really have to focus in and say, this is what we're doing. This is how you use it.
Yeah.
This is
I hope in 2026 to see the death of the term vibe coding. I mean, I think it's kind of like a derogatory, like script kiddie was. And there's so many of us that are building things, and you there's these dismissive engineers. I mean, it's similar to like people who are attorneys who are dismissive of other people not practicing, but non-JD people in the practice. Like, they're completely viable. The law is not rocket science, and there's room for lots of other, solutions and people helping people and all this in the legal space. And sometimes we're guilty of the same sort of thing, looking down on, junior attorney, baby attorneys, terms like that sort of like, and that's vibe coding for me, because a lot of us out there that are building things using these tools, I have an electrical engineering degree. I've coded down assembly level stuff in DSP chips and stuff. So yes, I understand architecture. I understand how to structure things. I understand the security risks, and I understand networking and tunneling and all these other things, and can read the documents as well as any engineer. And so it's a bit dismissive to use that term across the board. And I'm hoping there's some variation or something that goes out, because there are real hobbyists. That's probably a better term. They're real hobbyists who understand what they're doing and who are building really cool things and really smart things, and really actually think contributing on a scientific and engineering basis too. Just as there are non-attorney people in the legal profession and legal ops and other where that make massive difference and are making great changes across the legal industry too. So hopefully that's my 2026 wish, not goal, but wish, is that term gets a little bit less in use and less thrown around as a way for people to be dismissive.
I've heard people start saying, though, that just like a coder produces code, lawyers produce contracts. We're all producing things. They call them what are they called? Artifacts is what we're creating in our work, all these different files and products. But the artifact is not the main part of our job. It's the end thing that we all can see and that we can teach an AI to do. But there's so much like unsaid stuff behind that. So like a coder, yes, they might take a few minutes and actually put down some lines of code. But before that, they had to meet with like the stakeholders, align values, find out what's actually needed. They had to align with like cybersecurity and then people in the future who are going to maintain. And then the same thing with lawyers. We don't just write in contract. We have to go meet with several groups and align what are we doing and what is the risk appetite and all this. And the lawyer then takes on like liability. Like if something goes wrong, I could lose my job. If something went wrong with the AI, you can't fire the AI kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
but the coder is responsible for fixing the code that they made, right, in a traditional setting too, and thinking through it. I think Srinity's seen my. I mean, I do a lot of thinking, tons of back and forth with AI and myself, and rewriting and putting together architecture documents and really thinking through the problem from lots of different directions. Planning out architectures, thinking about what works best before I ever hit the coding tools and, start to build it out. And even when I one-shot things like I did yesterday on the thing I posted about, it's thought through like how to structure this and how the app should be structured and what I need to tell it about the different moving pieces. And then, the questions that it asks and I go back and forth with, there's more thought to it. It's not just throwing spaghetti against the wall. There is a lot of that back and forth and stuff you don't see before the end product if you're doing it right. And I think a lot of people are doing it right. They're thinking about it before they put pen to paper, just like we do as attorneys, thinking before they hit the keystrokes and put down the code.
I would add to that by saying that when Kevin and I, first spoke one-on-one, he was critical about a lot of like mainstream products, and I understood why. Like when he shared his documents with me, where he had put so much thought into thinking about what the role of a legal team is in a company. Like is it just reviewing contracts, and most of the products out there are just focused on that one process, and there's nothing wrong with that, but then that might end up creating more work than solving a problem, as you've seen with so many automated red lines these days, that it's creating more work, net, and that's just like not the point of building any kind of technology. Like it should be about efficiency and overall efficiency for the whole organization, not just for one team versus another. So I agree with him on a lot of thought needs to be put into something before you build out and scale. You might get distribution networks, like if you've already been present in that space, and like that might accelerate you in the first few years, but you don't really have like a strong foothold or moat that might sustain you through the long winters and like through a decade, through 2 decades. So those are things I think even now, like many of like the leading AI startups are probably missing. Maybe like I don't see them from the outside, maybe they're doing it from the inside, but that is something that is definitely like a gap in the market.
Yeah,
I think it's like, I was going to say with product development, I think that those are people focusing on the tasks that people do. So they see what do in-house counsel do? Oh, they redline a bunch of contracts. So clearly they need help with this task. Or legal's quote unquote the bottleneck. If we empower business to do the red lines, then we don't have legal as the bottleneck anymore, without really thinking through what that task is. Right? Like your job isn't to redline contracts. Your job is to surface up risk in the contracts that's adverse to your company. So you could review a contract and not redline it. Or you could just review a contract, pick up the phone and say, hey, can we just change this one clause?
Yeah,
and then we're done, right? Like it's not understanding where the task falls in the job and then just creating a product for that task.
Yeah, there's so much, that the tactical is the task, if you need to do it at all. But the strategic is like, do you even need to do it at all? I've got a couple this week that, hey, here's an agreement, and I had some indemnification. It was indemnification that just didn't make sense. But when you looked at the thing really quick, you're like, there's nothing that we would have to ever, there's no situation in which we'd ever actually, so you know what? Just sign it, right? But that's like a risk analysis, strategic decision, and there's a lot of business intelligence that goes into that. And I think that's what Srinidhi and I talked about is like, really getting to doing the task the highest level. The reason that they pay the partner in the law firm, it's not because they do a better red line, faster red line. It's because they know when and when not to do it, and how to when they do it, how to negotiate it with the other side, how to position it, how to there's a lot that goes into that, and that's the piece that you just can't automate your way out of that easily, like that reason and stuff. And so applying some intelligence to it is, I think maybe that's the 2026, 27, finally figuring out that it's more than just a task. You have to apply the intelligence level to it. And, and I think I see some glimpses of that in the papers and some of the work that I'm doing on trying to apply a level of reason and Socratic method to how to think through problems as they come, and apply that business strategy. Does it even make sense to redline this thing here? That's not an if this then that sort of thing. It's really applying a lot of reason, a lot of stuff to that problem, not just an if this then that, because it's easy to do those and automate those, but it's a lot harder to look at it from 5 different angles, and what if this, gameplay it out 3 levels down, and then decide what makes sense, and then take the right tactical step.
Yeah.
And I would go back even a further step. I meet with my clients and we look at their templates that they're presenting to the other side. And I tell them, if your contract is constantly being changed, like, why don't you just update your template? You know, stop making people push back every time if it's 100% push back on.
Yeah. And I remember, I think, Emma, you had that post on LinkedIn. Was that a day or two? Was that earlier this week?
Yeah, I think it was.
Said,
yeah.
I'll let you explain it if you want, but it was something about how we're seeing more red lines that are AI generated that are irrelevant. Do you want to? I wish I could find it when I'm here, but
yeah, no, I can find it and drop it in the chat. But yeah, I mean, I was just checking out the subreddit Legal Tech, which I scan, every once in a while, and saw this comment from somebody in the wild talking about how many more red lines they're getting on a regular basis that are irrelevant, causing more work and causing more friction to the business and to deals. So kind of the opposite problem, like the opposite of what this solution is supposed to be doing, because you're getting it from, especially from non-lawyers, right? Which is fine. I'm a non-lawyer. And I remember, there are many times where I have, I don't want to say cursed, but I've been like, come on, legal team, like I need to get this deal done and wish I could just do the red lines or the review myself. But again, without understanding what the issues are in play, and if it just auto red lines, you're creating friction where there doesn't need to be friction, and it actually decelerates you.
Yeah, and that was one of my problems with one of the early redlining tools that I was sort of forced to use because the VCs that invested in this company had also invested in ours and went to our CEO and insisted we use it. And it just over redline. It was just doing, I mean, it's still this way. Everyone's Word plugin is just a diff against a playbook, and it's over redlines. And I would go back to my junior team members who I thought it might be helpful to help them understand, and explain, but it was actually the opposite, and it over redlined, and then they thought that was the right way. And I go in and say, look, you only had to change one word here, but maybe not even that word. You probably, you might have been able to write a comment and make a change elsewhere and actually get what you wanted. But it's, that subtlety, I would have to undo the red lines that got done, and I'd have to go back and kind of retrain them in a sense. And so and I haven't seen anything yet out there that applies any sort of business intelligence and to redlining, and most of them are from my view are built by people who aren't experts in the space, like or they haven't talked to experts in the space about how we actually think about these things and how we negotiate in the comments and how we try to do subtle. And we think about the parties' different leverage, and we think about the personalities on the other side and how the comments and the changes we make will land with them based upon how we're looking at the agreement and how we've seen their earlier comments and red lines and where their landmines might be. That stuff is not at all considered in these, and until it is, like, it really undermines, a lot of the work we're doing in-house. We have limited resources. A great comment in the comments here about, we don't write processes down. It's because a lot of times we're just like jumping from emergency to emergency. It's really hard. And I think I tell people my superpower is I'm fundamentally lazy. I don't want to do something twice if I don't have to, but to get the time to pull yourself back and say, you know what, I'm going to let a couple things drop so I can spend the time to write down a process, think through the process, and then automate the process can be hard when you're understaffed, and in-house teams have traditionally been very understaffed. Legal tech is helping, but we're still like usually scrambling. So even now, as we think about automating stuff, writing down a process and all that can be hard, but it is a necessary thing. And Justin, you and Emma, you both provide valuable services to people to kind of walk them through and help them do that. But it's a hard thing to do, and it leads to a lot of the gaps in knowledge about what we do. And people just see the output and see the work product and think that that's what they need to fix. But most often it's the process. It's figuring that stuff out and how we come to that work product that they really need to figure out.
Yeah. And I think your point, like, about playbooks, So that is, again, to Justin's point, the point in the comments about how you're not writing down your processes or you don't necessarily have a playbook. Like, I think a lot of this assumption too is like, of course you have a playbook. Like, every time you see this, indemnification clause, you see X, you will do Y, or we always have these payment terms, or we always do X, Y, Z. And as you said, that's not always the case, right? And that you do have that business reasoning to it. And I think a lot of that is figuring out, again, where that fits within the business. And this is specifically to contracting, but also that's implementation from the business side, right? You can't just sell a product. You can't just sell the redlining product and be like, okay, this is how you input your playbook. Good luck. Call us if you need anything, and then we'll call you for renewal 3 months before the contract's up. Like, that's not going to work for legal tech, and that's not going to work from a business perspective if you don't want your product to churn.
Yeah.
And if you want it to be actually useful, right? So this redlining tool you were kind of forced to use before, right? If the team had sat down with you and really invested and focused on implementation, it would have saved you a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
And you would have had a partner in this tool. And then it could have actually helped your juniors a lot more than you having to, it actually hurting your juniors to a degree where they're like, oh, of course, like we should over redline like this. And you're like, no, I have to go back and fix it.
Yeah, well, the other side, this will kill the deal. The example I use is like if I'm a startup and Microsoft sends me an NDA, I just sign it. Because there's not, like, it's an existential threat to my company to not get that deal probably, but that whatever they've thrown in their NDA, even if they threw a residuals clause in there, it's not the end of the world. And I'm just going to say, sign the damn thing. And to your point about indemnification, I could have a fallback or an indemnification playbook, but indemnification in a vendor agreement coming inbound to me, and indemnification in a development agreement, indemnification in they're all, I'm going to take different positions, and I'm going to, so it's more complex than just like, if I see an indemnification, hold harmless or whatever, I'm always going to say defend and settle, right? Or whatever my fallback is. That is not always the case in every sort of situation,
The AI would need all this context.
Right. I need all the
power differential, the
Right.
need for the deal, whether it's going to die if you don't do it, like all of this.
Right. And then, you're in some deals, you may like have to suck it up and like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. It doesn't make any sense. But the overall deal scope, this, the risk balance is okay. We can sign this deal. It's not the best thing in the world. And we definitely shouldn't use it as precedent. We shouldn't put it in our playbook as like the fallback we want to go to, but it can be very bespoke. I think if you're in-house and doing a lot of deals, you're trying to get as many of them as possible that can fall in the playbook, and that you can automate as much as possible, and you can enable your sales team to say if this then that, and you can accept these, and here's the escalation path for this exception or that exception. But there's always those edge cases, and you have to have
I think this is excellent advice. Automate the 80% of the simple stuff that you can.
Yeah.
Get rid of that stuff that's wasting your time, and then you can actually focus on the remaining 20%. And maybe you can find tools and ways to simplify that remaining 20%, but don't focus on it initially.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we can get comments from Srinidhi and Nate, because Srinidhi is building these kinds of tools, and Nate is your everyday user of these tools. So they probably have comments too.
I mean, this might be a controversial one, but I'm still going to put it out there because I don't come from a legal background myself. Initially, I couldn't understand why these redlining tools were being sold to lawyers. Like once I realized like what they exactly do, like I was like, this is something that should be sitting with people who are not lawyers, like who don't have the legal knowledge, who don't have the playbook themselves. So the legal expertise is productized to people who don't have that expertise to get like that first pass or sense of what they're seeing. Because like when I was an investment banker and like when I was going through these lengthy deal agreements, my biggest frustration was I couldn't make head or tails of like the language, and I wish like there was something that would explain to me as a non-lawyer person, what it exactly meant and like what do I need to do here. because even when a lawyer redlines using these tools, like someone needs to, like a human ultimately is taking responsibility or liability. And I'm sure like no lawyer is just using the tool and then forgetting about the contract. It's not probably fully automated. So that always kind of irked me, or I didn't understand the whole mechanics around it. But that also helped me in a way, in the sense that I started focusing more and more on the business side, or like use cases where lawyers aren't using these tools themselves. And that's, I think, what's helped me a lot. And there are many legal tech tools that are very useful for lawyers, but I don't think like clicking on a button one by one to get a red line is something that a lawyer needs. Probably like a fully like line by AI document that a lawyer can finally review, yes. But I've seen so many tools where you get like a set of reviews and the lawyer is clicking one by one, like accept, reject. I just like don't see a point of all of those like fake automation steps.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I'd add some of the ideas about playbooking too. Is there's definitely the risk of over redlining. They're so easy to build, and if you're getting a lot of inbound vendor contracts, it's easy to say, I'll just make my customer MSA as my playbook, and now we basically have two contracts that AI is accelerating, and that isn't helpful at all. That sets us backward 2 steps. So on the one hand, can we more thoughtfully develop our playbooks, focus on what's important, obviously. But on the other side, I will say, it's a useful checker. It helps you identify things that you may have missed when you're rushing through. It's that second set of eyes. And I do think, unfortunately, we still see a lot of awful one-sided contracts. So you do kind of get some of that benefit to leveraging as a way to push back on, hey, I need to make 25 red lines on this just because it's such a bad template. So you do see some help there. The other idea that I like is, and I'll put it in the chat, Christian Brown, he's at, I think, Agiloft. He's a legal knowledge engineer. He put out a post yesterday, and one of the concepts he talked about was an error budget, maybe something to think about for 2026. And I really like that. What risks might we be okay? Kevin, your example with that Microsoft, building that in as something we're okay accepting. Srinidhi, you mentioned some ideas that this is just okay if we just get the deal done, and thinking about that as a way to build in some things that we're okay with as part of the process, as opposed to just making it a click a button and the AI does it and moves on. So I'll drop that in the chat.
One of my biggest concerns about some of those tools is that ultimately, at the end of the day, as Justin said earlier, we're responsible for the work that gets put out. And when the CEO comes and says, why did we do this? Or what does this mean? Or whatever. And I had a great, probably my worst grade in engineering, but also my best. I was the highest grade in the class at an A- with a 55% on my, and the teacher, his position was that if you couldn't teach it, you didn't understand it. And he made us each get up once a week and teach part of the class. And it was like not differential equations, like, some circuit design stuff. And I think that's, when you're using these tools, especially junior people using these tools and don't understand why the change, or business users who are using it, it's not explained, the explanation, the why does this say this? How does this work? It's like looking at, somebody who's never seen code, looking at code and trying to decipher it. That's not easy, right? There is some logic to it. If you apply a logical mind, you can sort of follow the flow and everything. But if it's not commented, if it's not documented, you're like, what in the world is going on here? What is this variable? What is this function doing? I don't know. I mean, contracts are similar, like and in a sense they are code. If then this, else this, definitions or kind of sub functions and all this built into contracts, but we don't explain them. They don't come with documentation and comments that explain them in the same way that code does. If it's written by somebody who's doing a good job of documentation, we don't talk about that in legal. That our contracts that we put out aren't documented like code, so it does leave people sort of just in a blind spot, and it puts us in a worse position for somebody just jumping in and looking at your contract or looking at your code and being able to explain it to somebody else. And that is, I think, a shortcoming of the profession and how we do things. But it's also like you wouldn't want all that stuff in your contract per se either. And it's a lot of extra work to do that documentation. But if you're really going to explain it, you're really going to do it right, that's what you need to do.
I did this when I was legal counsel. I wrote playbooks that didn't just describe like the changes, but like how to get the change. Because a lot of stuff wasn't legal clauses. It was like finance or tax. So somebody had to go to finance and tax to get their okay. And maybe they had to do a procedure or something. And the business would always come to legal and ask us to go do it. So I wrote in there how to get a change. Go ask finance, and I put the burden on the business to go do that. I also translated the legalese into simple language so that the person, like just like you said, commenting the computer code, they could actually read it and understand what it said. So I focused on our templates because like 70 or 75% of contracts were actually on our own template. So that 80% rule, focus on your own stuff, the stuff that you already know that you can control. And then I gave it to the business. I did have this idea though, like what if we took some kind of an edited version of this playbook and we made it available to the other parties? So we said, like, here is our contract. Here's also our guidelines. This is the reasoning why we're doing this and this kind of stuff, like radical transparency.
There are several companies that do that. Mainly SaaS, very few, but the ones that do it are pretty good. I think maybe HubSpot, Snowflake. I keep a list of examples, but they have explainer pages where they will say, it's almost written to the person on the other side who's reviewing the contract. It'll say, this is what our tool does. We don't install software on your servers. This is how it works. This is the data we collect. This is why we won't indemnify you for this. And it cuts through so much of that confusion and redlining, not really knowing what risk you're redlining for, or just missing something entirely. Those pages are great. I hope we see more of those. I think that's one of the highest leverage activities.
How do lawyers know the context? How do they know what they can redline? Because if you don't know what's actually happening, you're just negotiating in the abstract. You're just like, well, number go down, looks good. And you don't know what the actual numbers mean. Like there are delivery times. There's certain dates of the month when payments go out. So if you put it down from like 30-day payment down to like 10, you might feel good and like it looks good. But like you ask the business or finance and they say, that's impossible. You can negotiate it down. It's not gonna speed up our payments.
Yeah, I think that the comment, like, so if you don't have like the snowflakes and everything, which is great. I think a lot of that does happen, and a lot of it's buried probably in internal documents and and negotiated documents in the comments. And it's a little bit of I wouldn't say game, but a little bit of an art of describing why you're asking for what you're asking and how the agreement works in framing it in a way that is logical and makes sense. And you have to think about who the audience is. Sometimes you're appealing to the business audience on the other side who's going to push their attorneys to not be a stick in the mud and take a logical business approach to things. Sometimes you're speaking to the other attorney on the other side, depending on if it's a heavier legal, context versus business context, but you're also keeping in mind that how you speak to them can set the stage for how the negotiation goes. So there's a lot of thought that goes into those, and it's a little more than just like documenting code, because you really are thinking about, in a sense, the way the developers don't have to, because code is a little more logical. You're thinking about the humans that you're going to be interacting with and that are going to be possibly just blindly applying their playbook to something, and you want to kind of divert them from blindly applying a playbook. And so that's the nuance that I think a lot of these companies that just do a blank red line diff don't get.
There's another big risk that I don't see people talk about as much. And I actually co-authored an article about it called Language as a Lens, which, and the gist of it essentially is that AI tools are great learning tools, but they are also extremely dangerous in the hands of young, inexperienced, professionals who are just, starting their jobs. They don't fully understand the context or what is happening, and then you suddenly get shown XYZ, and because that's the first thing you see, you kind of develop a cognitive bias or preference towards that, and I think that is quite dangerous if it is amplified across the whole legal practice area. Now there's a huge influx of first year associates who are going to start their day one with AI, and they are all using AI tool A or AI tool B. There are not like 10 tools that have like captured the market. It's like 2 or 3 tools. And so those are the risks that I would be worried about if I were a law firm partner. Like, how am I developing my incoming associates and grooming them to become lawyers of tomorrow? Because it cannot hinge on AI said this, so this must be right.
I think the similar concern is over relying on the tool and the red lines that it generates. There's all the hallucinated cases that litigators will file because they're not double checking their citations. And so the equivalent in the contracts context is you run your AI review and you're done. You don't bother reading the contract, and who knows what you missed. There's that great example of a most favored nations clause that was missed by, I don't know, 3 out of 4 tools or something. And someone may not check that because they will think, hey, I did the tool review and I'm done. And so I don't know how we develop that incentive aside from just kind of professional responsibility to review even after AI has done its thing, because I have to imagine it's happening. So
I think that's is it a time saver if then you have to review it after you've done it? But if you also look at it as if it's a junior doing the work for you, you'd still review the junior's work. Though I think we all know that doesn't always happen. So I think you're right. It's like, where does that fall in? Do people just make it part of their workflow? Is it a professional responsibility thing? But at the end of the day, it's the lawyer who's responsible, not the AI. Kind of to Serenity's point earlier.
Yeah, and to Justin's earlier point, I mean, and to Nate's point too, I think that if you're applying strategic thought to it, there's probably a level of like, so what, for some percentage of your contracts. Like, if it meets these criteria, so what? Like, I'll do an AI pass if it didn't find these 3 things. But you know what? Even if it missed them, who cares? Right. And that's coming from an attorney. I know people are like, what, but that's, you have to think that way, because not everything is that important. Not everything is that substantial, and you have to get things done. And so if you can identify those guardrails and then just say, within these guardrails, I'll do a first pass. And if it misses it, so what? It'll catch like 80%, like that junior person. I give work to junior people, and I sort of like say, do it and be responsible for it. But if you miss something, you're not fired. We'll just work on the process and maybe add another step to make sure that you don't miss it again. And you iterate. But that's the process. You don't just say it's got to be perfect, because perfection, enemy of getting things done, right?
Yeah.
I had a beautiful manager who gave the metaphor of sweeping the floor with a broom, and he said, yeah, the broom will get like 99% of the stuff. You then sweep it into the dustpan to pick it up and throw that away. There's still 1% left, right? So then you go and you sweep up that little bit and you get that into the thing. There's still a little bit left. He said you will never get 100%. So at a certain point, you just have to say, good enough.
I was going to say that there are some really good use cases with first passes, for example, where there's a 200, 300 page document that you want to quickly digest. Yes, like 100% like AI should be giving you a first pass for that. But there are certain things like when you know that you will be reading the document word by word because it is just like something extremely important. Like, why bother wasting your time clicking a few buttons here and there and then going and doing the same thing? Like that it's like showcase efficiency, creating efficiency for no one, but kind of like a usage metric that you used AI for the sake of using AI.
And there is a lot of FOMO out there. There is a lot of pressure to like figure out how to use it and how to, everyone's getting pressure. How do you use it to amplify your teams and to, not have to hire as many people, or, there's a lot of pressure out there and a lot of pressure on teams to like adopt tools. And so they adopt the ones that have the names, that have the press, that have the hype, but they're not really, one, they're probably more expensive than what you could do yourself. Two, people probably aren't using them to the full effect and getting those benefits, but it's just a rush to try to figure out, how to get in there and use it, because there is such pressure to not get behind and not, be seen by the board or whoever, as not leaning into this stuff.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories was I talked to somebody who said they were drowning at NDAs, and we have so many NDAs, and we're looking at all these AI tools to review it. And I said, have you ever considered maybe a standardized NDA? Those third-party bond terms, something like that. And they said, well, then what's the point of AI? And I don't know. I think that's kind of the FOMO, fear of missing out. It's what do you need to solve the problem? So,
yeah, that's a good point. Where I think people are focused on the how to solve the problem more than what problem they're trying to solve, right? So to your point, right, it's, okay, I'm drowning in NDAs, I need a great AI contracting tool for this, and you're like, well, you could just standardize it and you wouldn't have any issues.
It's not the tool that you need, it's the organized documents that you need. And organized documents, you can reach that in any number of ways. It's not just AI.
Or even going further, Justin, like it's not even the organized documents. It's like, well, you're trying to solve for organizing these documents. It's just getting to the essence of what problems are you trying to solve before trying to find a tool. But as Kevin's saying with FOMO, people are trying to get a tool and then figure out a problem to solve with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing that.
Oh, go ahead.
the hype seems to be going down. A lot of, like, we were promised 3 years ago we would all be out of jobs by now. We're still here. And so I think a lot of people are learning with experience that the marketing is not up to the reality that was promised, kind of thing. And so I guess my question is getting your hands dirty and making mistakes really the only way to learn?
There's a certain, Srinidhi made a great point earlier, which is like, there's a certain point of like setting back and watching and waiting. Like maybe you didn't sign that contract for, $1,500 a seat. You waited and watched how other people applied it. You saw their use cases play out, and you talked to them about how they're using it, why they're using it. And, something like, well, we kind of stopped using it. Not that many people are using it. We didn't find it that, you've dodged a little bit of a bullet. In the meantime, you've automated your processes. You thought about like what you're really doing. You're doing the hard work, the regular everyday stuff. You do apply AI here or there, but you're doing it in very strategic ways when you get a problem that you can solve with it. And, you experiment in those little ways, and then you just, you come in later when the tools have dropped down in price, when, they have actual use cases that make sense for you, and adopt them then. So maybe there's like a hurry up and wait, experiment, play on the side, dabble with it yourself and see where it might be useful here or there. But don't just jump in, expecting it's going to be a panacea and solve all your problems.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it, from a lot of perspectives. Obviously, I've made GTM consultancy, but even from that perspective, I'm always telling people that they need to see if this is a tool that's actually going to solve a problem. Because for the business, it's not good to sell just a bunch of products to people who aren't going to use it. you're going to churn, you're not going to get referrals, you're going to get a negative perception. So even from a revenue perspective for these legal technology companies, you really want to make sure that your product is solving a valuable problem and that you're actually partnering with your clients and making sure they're being implemented properly. That it's not just a set it and forget it. You're not selling the cure to FOMO.
There was a data point that was put out by Axiom, I think mid 2025 or later in 2025, which essentially spoke about how a lot of legal teams are making these legal tech product purchase decisions themselves, like without consulting their IT departments, for example. And there is a risk to this that probably legal teams, like in-house legal teams, are missing. And Kevin can add more to it because I've never worked in-house. It's because an in-house team is considered a cost center the moment you purchase any kind of tool that is supposed to create efficiency, but you're not showing your finance person efficiency because the tool is not really creating efficiency for you. Then you get questioned, well, like, you made this AI investment, you purchased this tool, but there is no real efficiency being created. Like, are you bad at your job? You're obviously not bad at your job. Like, there is a mismatch between what the tool promised it could do versus what you really could do. But now you have put yourself in a situation where you're answerable, to your CEO, CFO, and also like figuring out, like, now just because you bought an AI tool, like, you need to be as efficient as possible. That means you're probably stressing yourself out so much to do work quickly. This might mean things slipping through the cracks and quality of work deteriorating, all because a tool entered the system without much thought behind why it was entering the system.
The counterpoint to that is that how many tools the finance teams and the engineering teams and everything have they adopted and dropped and wasted money on, and far more money than the legal team. Again, even if we're considered a cost, I think there's a shift. I mean, as a GC, like, trying to deliver on OKRs that actually are tied to metrics that matter for the company, ARR, like how am I supporting sales cycle, and that leads to ARR, things like that. And so, in that context, like, I think you can come in and say, look, this is a drop in the bucket, so we made a wrong choice here. I'm not saying don't try tools, don't buy tools. In the relative sense of things, they're not as expensive as some of the tools that other teams adopt and waste time on. I mean, Jira is a mess, but and it's engineers seem to love it, but I think Slack, I mean, how much money is spent on Slack, and it's more of a distraction in my mind than anything else. But even the AI tools that everybody else in the company is adopting, there's a cost to those. They're iterating, they're finding that they don't quite meet their needs, and they're having to switch and everything. So I wouldn't be completely fearful of that, as the counterpoint. But you do need to make smart investments. I mean, you are, especially if you're a leader, you're responsible for the investments you and your team are making. And you may have to go back with a little egg on your face and say, we made a wrong choice here. We didn't evaluate this. And legal teams haven't traditionally evaluated and a lot of technology that way. So it's not a muscle that we have. So, Emma, and other people who are doing consulting, to say, here's a process you should follow. Here's best practices for evaluating and deciding to bring things on. Your IT, you may have processes for onboarding. I know we do, where, to onboard any vendor, I've got to go through IT and get an IT security review first, check off their SOC 2 compliance, all that sort of thing. That's fairly standard, but it's not a muscle that, like many muscles that get developed in attorneys. I mean, we don't get management training in law school. We don't get a lot of things, we don't, talk about processes very much. We don't talk about the real work that we do. It's very academic, like we're all going to be law professors and, academics, but that's a small fraction of us. We don't get the training. So that's where consultants, people who can help, guide, here's how you choose, and here's why you choose, and here's how you actually look at a real problem and wait until you find a solution that actually is going to, has a good chance of fixing that problem before you commit the money and you get the egg on your face for having made this bad business decision. Because we're all trying to level up, I think, in these roles, to be equal business partners to the rest of the folks on the executive teams that we work with. And so that's a skill we need to develop, how to evaluate technology, how to decide what to use, and when to just cut bait too.
I like your analogy about the muscle that we need to, I think we need to start with small innovations, because changing, like boiling the ocean, nobody wants that, right? But if you can find like a small subset of motivated people who are open to change, because not everybody is open to change, right? We're human beings. Most people just want to keep stuff the same. We don't like it when Windows 11 completely changes what Windows 10 had. Like, where's my stuff? Where are the icons, right? So if you can find a motivated group of people, do something small that they have control over and that they are wanting to see done, then you do that. Then you get a success story, and then they tell everybody else in the company, like, hey, we did a change, it was successful, we should all do it. And then you get some more and more and more. But I also think that innovation is not a destination, it's a journey, and it's never going to be done.
Yeah. And as a GC, like my win, you know, maybe over the past week or that I'm shooting for is like, you know, the tools I've adopted, maybe they actually have uses across the organization. Maybe I actually can help the organization. You know, you can leverage the tool I brought in and it's a great add for your team. And there are some, you know, tools like that that are kind of a mix of legal tech and other, they're really more about process, streamline, flank, things like that, like intake tools that not just for legal, but the business, the finance team could use it as a front end for all of their intake. So, you know, I'm bringing it on, I'm showing them how I'm using it. And maybe I'm putting some vendor agreement or some other finance process in it to simplify things for them and doing them a favor. But then they're like, hey, legal brought in this great tool that now everyone can use and it helps them. So I look for, you know, those sort of wins. It helps my team, but how can it help the rest of the company and be something to the rest of the team's like, hey, they're really good at sourcing tech that's helping the rest of us.
And then you become an Eagle business partner.
Yeah.
It's office tech. I find that a lot of what lawyers do, it's just glorified office work. We like to pretend it's not, but it's just moving documents around. Every department does this.
Yeah.
All right. Should we wrap it up? It's been great meeting with you guys.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed
Yeah, this was great.
having you guys.
When's the next one?
I'm thinking twice a year is a good cadence, unless somebody says like, "Hey, let's meet every week," you know. But I think right
somewhere
around
in
New
between.
Year's. Yeah. Oh, somewhere in between, maybe every 3 months, or would that be too much?
I could do it quarterly.
Yeah, quarterly.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
quarterly.
I mean, I love hearing from what you guys are doing. And again, like Emma and Trinity and Justin, especially, like you're kind of not in the same in-house counsel sort of role in the same way that I am. So it's great to hear your perspectives and your questions like make me think about what I'm doing too. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. And vice versa. Like I love hearing from everyone on this panel. Like it's really good to hear from Kevin and Nate. So I think it's a much different perspective than a lot of the echo chamber sometimes too, because you guys are actually in the nitty gritty. And Kevin, you're actually buying products and evaluating products for your own company. So it's really good for me to hear that perspective and just getting a lot of diverse perspectives.
Cool. Great chat with y'all.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll close it out, and we do have an after party meeting for the audience members who wish to join, and anybody who's on this call, if you wish to go over, it's going to be a Google Meet, and I guess we'll just talk with the audience members if they're there as well and if they want to.
Cool.
Sure, I can join for a few minutes.
I'll try to join.
Thanks all. This was a pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.